Welcome to Inspire, the Angel Flores podcast, where you'll be inspired, equipped, and entertained. This podcast is sponsored by Mosaic Church, a church for people who don't really like church. To learn more about Mosaic, please visit our website at greeleymosaic.com.
Okay, Jerry, thanks for being on. Thanks for coming on and doing this. We've been friends for, 12, 13, 14, Mosaic's 15. You guys came along in the first couple of years, so it's been a long time.
Yep.
Got a lot of history. We've had a text thread with a couple of other guys that's gone probably 10 years and a lot of insults. And so Diane said we can't be cutting each other down today.
A lot of gems in there.
A lot of blackmail material both ways for sure. So let's kick off, Jerry. Let's hear your story. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? That kind of stuff.
All right. Well, Jerry Naranjo, I was born in Pierce, Colorado, which is about 20 miles north of here. I was born
Population of Pierce.
Population of Pierce. Well, I'm here today, so that means it's down significantly. I don't know, really. I think it was maybe 500 people.
Yeah, it's a small little farming town.
It's a farming town, mostly where everybody was working in agriculture, or some people were commuting into Greeley, but mostly a ag town. And
all right, a lot of farmers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, farmers and support people. There was dairies in the area, so people were living in town and work. Like a sleepover community,
bedroom
community, right? Everybody's just working somewhere else.
How did your family end up there?
My dad's dad, my grandpa, moved from New Mexico, northeast New Mexico, a town called Trujillo. And he was born on a ranch with all of his brothers and sisters. I think there were a lot of them, somewhere around 14 to maybe, I don't know the story exactly, but it's a lot.
Okay.
Well, the dream of all the boys.
That was your dad's siblings, 14? Yep. No TVs.
That was my
then.
dad's
his
siblings.
Okay. Your grandpa's.
My grandpa's.
So uncles and aunts.
Yep.
At least 14.
Yeah. I think my great-great-grandpa had 20 plus kids.
Wow.
So out of
a lot
the
of
ranch,
love to give.
Out of the ranch, you needed sheep herders, I guess. And that was really it was a dead end out there for all of these young cowboys, and they were growing up out on the ranch, and there really was no future other than working the ranch. Right. So most of them left, and most of them came north to work for Union Pacific.
Okay.
So my grandpa actually worked in Cheyenne in the stockyard, and he, then settled in Pierce. It's about a 45-minute drive into Cheyenne.
Got it.
So a lot of his brothers did that. I mean, I have an uncle, or his brother was living in North Platte, Nebraska. Same situation, working the stockyards.
Commuting the same way, though.
They all did the same thing, right? They needed to get out of the farm. They needed to get off the ranch, and they needed to come make money. So my grandpa had about 5 acres out east of Pierce, and that's where he raised everybody. My dad, his brothers, and his sisters, I think there are 10 or 11 of them. And so my dad was actually born in Cheyenne, and once they settled in northern Colorado, Pierce became home.
And then how many siblings do you have?
I have one brother and one sister. Okay. Sister a couple years younger than me, and my brother's maybe 9 years younger than I am.
All right. Talk about growing up in Pierce.
Growing up in Pierce. Well, we grew up out in the country, right? So we weren't actually even in the city limits of Pierce. We were out east of town, northeast of town. We were living on my grandpa's farm in a mobile home.
Okay.
And that's, for most of my childhood, that's the memory I have. And I have the memory of driving into town and driving into the town of Pierce, population 400 or 500. And that's where all the people who were financially wealthy were living.
Interesting.
Right? So when we could go into town or ride our bikes into town, we got to see how, what the other side of the tracks looked like. Wow. Literally the other side of the tracks, because we lived next to the railroad tracks.
Wow. Literally on the other side of the tracks.
Yeah.
Bunch of little kids riding their bikes.
Yeah.
Saying, look how all these rich people live.
Yeah, exactly. And we drive into Pierce to dream. Right? Yeah. And then I don't know what age I was when my dad went through his own transformation. My dad was 17, 18 when I was born. So, we had 10, 12 years there of him navigating adult life.
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah, a young man to a man. And I think somewhere along the way, he had a transformation and things started popping for him. And I believe it was around 10, 12 years old, we actually moved into town. I remember riding my chopper bike into town like we had just hit the lotto, right? So we're moving
Jeffersons,
we were moving on up, and it was amazing, right? That I remember that bike ride like it was yesterday that we got to move into town. So
your dad bought a house, or
yep.
So what did he do? What kind of work was he doing when you grew up? And
yeah, starting out, my dad worked in agriculture, right, and just trying to find different places to work, different jobs. And it was actually his brother-in-law gave him a job in concrete, doing concrete work here in Greeley for Cowan Concrete back in the day.
Are they still around? Or
I don't believe they're around anymore. But, a company that was around for a long time. A lot of my family actually worked for that company, and a lot of them, learned the concrete trade. So my dad got on at a young age. And, within a year's time, he moved up rather quickly. And little by little, he started to master that craft of concrete work and concrete finishing and
flat work mostly, or what were they doing? Sidewalks?
He was doing a lot of flat work to start with, but what became his niche and his specialty was structural concrete. And the ability to form and build false work to pour concrete into became his niche. So in 1982, he started his own company and started doing structures and whatever concrete work needed to be done for a couple of big GCs in the northern Colorado area.
So, so a structural, is that like, I don't know.
Be a bridge abutment. It'd be an irrigation diversion structure.
So you're building these big
walls.
boxes. You're going to pour concrete in them, and they're going to have different functions.
Yep.
Essentially. Okay.
Yeah. So that was his specialty. That was really his niche, and that's where things started to take off for him. And that's, I guess, how we got to move into town.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So now he's the boss.
Yep. Yeah. He and my uncle started a company in 1982, and they didn't start out with much. I remember the first jobs they did were out of the back of a car, right?
Wow.
And they had tools in the trunk. Then they got a pickup, and then they had another pickup, and then they,
that's when you know you're making it, when you get the pickup.
I think the time that it hit that they were onto something was when they got their first cell phones in their trucks, but they were actually big radios, right? And you had to carry them in a small suitcase.
Right, I remember those.
And it made sense from a business standpoint. You needed those things, and when they had those things, to me, it was like, well, I was probably a teenager by that point. I said, they're doing well. They're finally like legitimizing their company, and they're becoming important in this small little piece of the world.
Right. Yeah. Getting the piece of the pie.
Yeah, for sure.
So then you're in high school watching this happen. Where'd you go to high school?
Yeah, I went to Highland High School, which is in Alt, which, Highland High School back in the day you used to have Alt High School, Pierce, Nunn. Every town had its own school. Agriculture was booming, a lot of things going on around agriculture. Well, as everybody started to leave agriculture, or things became centralized and taken over by, bigger farms, those towns started to fade away. And so Highland High School and the Highland school system is really a bunch of towns put together to make up one school system. A lot of the kids are bussed in from farms and ranches way out on the northeastern plains. So it is really unique in that sense.
So if it snowed, it's shut down because the buses.
I don't know. It snowed today, and the chaos that was out on the roads is surprising.
Come on, people.
I don't know that we had a lot of snow days back then. It was just a different part of life, a different way of life, and a different level of toughness, and a lot fewer cars.
Yeah.
So
a lot of that. Yeah.
We would always be in school. It seemed like very few snow days.
So then graduated from Highland High School.
Graduated from Highland in 1988. And
what were you interested in school? Were you in any clubs? Was it?
I was very much into sports and football, basketball, track. That was my thing. As far as school went, I have a unique story with regard to how I ended up where I ended up. So when I was in elementary school, there was a teacher, I think her last name was Ruth, as in Babe Ruth.
Mm.
And she carved out a small group of us to start on an accelerated learning path. And in fourth grade, what would happen is they would bus a few of us all the way to Alt. So from Nunn to Alt, 10 miles on the bus at noon, so that we could be
Big
under
city
her
of
watch.
Alt.
Yeah, we'd made it as students, right?
Yeah,
we had made it. And it was really the start of the first I'd ever heard of a gifted and talented program that she created under her watch.
Wow.
So when that happened, for me, what really kicked in was that I was good at school and I could get somewhere in this world with being good at school.
Mm.
And that was really all her creation.
Right.
Because she had the vision for that. And
that's an important moment, I think, in anyone's life, but especially a kid when an adult you respect looks at you and says you're different in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Like they start to sort somehow, right?
Yep.
And you're sorted into the good group.
Yep.
And that's a big moment, man, for a kid.
Yeah, it was. And the attention they put toward my education was really special because it was unnecessary, right? They could have just went about their business, teaching,
right,
and doing their thing, collecting their paycheck. But for whatever reason, she decided that she was going to do more than that. She was going to make an impact. For whatever was motivating her, I have no idea. But
shout out to Miss Ruth.
Miss Ruth, yeah.
Mrs. Ruth.
And that happened to me along my path or along my journey. I would run into educators who would just take an interest in me. I remember my very first experience in high school track, and I had a coach who was he's a local legend in a lot of ways. He was a punter kicker for UNC, and he was trying out for NFL teams and trying to get on as a place kicker. And my freshman year, I ended up going to state in the long jump. And why this guy, with all the things he's probably got going on in his life, took so much time and attention or time and care to get me to state, get me back, making sure I was getting the very best training I could possibly get, introducing me to better ways of eating, better ways of performing as far as stretching and weightlifting, and, why that person was put into my path. I still don't know. But there are some people along the way that I'll never forget for the way they interjected themselves into my life for no real reason.
Right.
No real reason we can understand.
Right. Yeah. The way I describe that is, I think God is playing this giant game of cosmic invisible chess, and he'll put pieces in places, and not necessarily the things we want, right? Oftentimes it's something we don't even want.
Yep.
But he's got this big game in mind that we can't see. And so that sounds like that's exactly what was happening. This teacher, this coach, take an interest in this kid who's some farm kid, but they saw something. Maybe they see themselves. That's possible that they see themselves. And so, yeah, anyway. So
Kevin Jeldon was my coach, and he's still involved in the track and field community. And I think one of the things that I should say about him too is he taught me how to be uncomfortable and how to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to be uncomfortable. The workouts that he would put together for us, were absolutely beyond words difficult.
Torture.
Yeah. And he knew it, and he'd done it himself.
Right.
He actually took me to Broncos camp, summer camp one time, and people knew him. And, I was mesmerized by the amount of dedication he had to what he was trying to do in athletics. Now, he didn't make it as an NFL kicker. even though I would hold footballs for him while he kicked after practice. He never quite cracked in, but it was a great piece of my life to share that journey with him for that little bit of time.
To be exposed to a guy who's pursuing greatness.
Yep.
Like to see what that looks like up close.
Yep.
Because even obviously your dad was working on stuff, but he's also your dad.
Yeah.
And he's also telling you to pick up your socks and clean your room. And so it's hard to admire the grind in someone that close. Yeah. That's interesting. So then you get this guy and you get to see what it looks like and maybe start seeing yourself in that somewhat kind of light. Interesting.
Yeah, he didn't really give me an option to say I wasn't going to college. It's where you're going to college and what's the best program and where you're going to run and where you're going to jump and how does that fit and does that make sense? And he's there walking that journey with me for some reason we'll never understand. Mm-hmm. And it's not even a consideration that I wouldn't go to school. It's just where am I going to jump? Where am I going to run? What's a scholarship look like?
Mm. And now your dad, what was his level of education?
So my dad, he makes a joke. I didn't graduate from high school. And then he says, well, I actually never made it to high school. He made it in like 7th grade.
Okay.
So he hated school. He hated the dynamics, the class, the things that were going on during those times as far as racism and exclusion.
So he experienced that.
He experienced that.
Was he in a segregated school?
He wasn't there a lot. So
he might have been.
The stories I hear, he wasn't there very often.
My dad was in a segregated school.
Yeah.
White and Mexican drinking fountains, all of it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was very obvious that when you went into town where you needed to be and what your place was.
Interesting.
So my dad had a pretty tough, my dad just didn't put up with that. It just rubbed him the wrong way.
Right.
So instead of conforming and figuring it out, he just couldn't do it. And, growing up the way they did in poverty, the way they did, he just had a bit of a chip on his shoulder and he wasn't going to do it. So he didn't fit well in that society,
that environment.
Yeah.
So then you come along, you're like, I want to run in college and I want to go to college first of all. Mm-hmm. How did that go over? What was your mom? What was she thinking during all this time? And
there's probably two different things that were going on in her head. One was that they were young, right? Very young, 17 when they were married. So some of the things that must have been going on in their head, I can't ever imagine. But
so she's 34, 35 at this time.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to help her son do something she's never done.
Yeah. They asked me, just a couple years ago, how did you ever even get into college? Like, what did you do? Did you have to fill things out? And if it weren't for Highland High School and the people that were in my path, I would have never figured it out.
Yeah.
Right. My parents had no experience with that.
You had to fill all the FAFSA and all that stuff out. You're doing it
as
a kid.
Yeah. And, my mom was always super supportive. Uh-huh. She was super supportive of what my dad was trying to do as well. And I think what I saw from them is that my dad, once he knew that I was considering that, he saw a path for me too, that I wouldn't have to go down the path he went down.
Nice, yeah.
Right? I wouldn't have to spend or have a career in the trades. Super hard on your body, super hard on your family. It's just hard. Right? So he thought, if you can go to school, that's going to be a better path. I don't know what that means, but it's got to be better than this.
Yes.
So
you're going to be on the other side of the tracks from the get. You know what I mean? As opposed to having to scrape and I mean, the whole goal of every parent is, or at least should be, I want to push our kids up one level past where we were. And I don't know what that looks like because I don't live there. But I just know it's better than this.
Yeah.
And I want to give them a better shot, start them better, all that. So that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool.
I think
he go to school.
He ended up, supporting whatever I decided to do, but they didn't have a lot to say about where I was going to go. Mm-hmm. I ended up going to Colorado School of Mines in Golden.
You couldn't get into UNC? Or?
I couldn't. I tried, but I was doing the best I could with what I had. So
I went to School of Mines instead of UNC. So those of you that are not from here, School of Mines is maybe the hardest school in Colorado to get into.
You know,
engineering school.
That place is a torture chamber. So
prestige. I mean, when someone says their kid's going to mines, it's a pretty big deal. UNC is also a great school.
Yeah.
However, not as hard to get into as mines. So
yeah,
mines
is really tough.
Applied to?
I applied. I was actually on a path to try to get into West Point, the military academy. And I was also, my dream school was Notre Dame. And I think they were really good at football at the time.
Yeah.
And I was a Catholic. So, I mean, it was the Holy Grail.
It was a fit, yeah.
Right. But what happened is I had a cousin who came back from the war, the Iraq conflict, and he came back, and I don't know all of the details of how it happened, but he came back severely injured. And I got to spend a Christmas with him. And, you know, to me, that I don't know if it was a sign that keep going down this other academic path, or just what it was.
Military's not.
Yeah, but at that time I was just very disgruntled with what he had went through, and then also how he was being treated as a veteran. So I think I just made a decision at that point to have an impact a different way.
Interesting. So mines it was.
Mines it was. I had a track scholarship. It was fairly close to home, but it was really a financial decision at that point. Notre Dame was about 3 times the cost, and mines was a great school. And all of my academic advisors were promoting that I go to mines.
Okay.
Knowing that in 4 or 5 years you will come out and you will have a career.
You'll be highly marketable.
Exactly.
So then what'd you study at mines?
So I went to mines with the idea that I would stay in civil engineering. You know, I had a lot of exposure to that with my dad and in the work he was doing. I was actually recruited to join a mining engineering company or mining company out of Boise, Idaho, about after my sophomore year. So a recruiter by the name of Bill Jackson came onto campus. He interviewed a bunch of us. They made me an offer. I was going to move from Colorado to Boise, Idaho for the summer and attend work in the corporate office. So I ended up going and detouring a little bit. I ended up in the mining industry for the rest of my academic career. But it's all similar. And in a lot of ways, it's, it's roads, it's access, it's 3-dimensional modeling. And in a lot of ways, it's very similar to civil engineering.
Okay.
For what I was doing, surface mining.
So you did that through college then?
Yeah.
That was the idea, is that
I'm
going to work there in the summers and
go
to work there when I'm done.
Oh, for sure. I went to Boise, Idaho on an internship. Bill Jackson was really my mentor, and I respected him. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was African-American. He was in corporate as an African-American. I just didn't even know that was possible. And the way he took me under his wing, it made me realize that none of this is going to stop me. The fact that I'm brown, the fact that I'm from a little town, none of it was going to stop me if I really wanted it. So I show up into Boise, and he took me in like one of his own. He was out recruiting minority students. That was his job within the corporation. And if he brought you in, you had to be the best of the best. He was not going to bring in a dud. And if you showed up to work and your tie wasn't straight, your belt and shoes didn't match, all of that was a no-go. He'd bring you in, he'd take a look at you, he would correct you. I remember one of my first experiences with him was in the lunchroom cafeteria, and he was watching me eat. And the way I grew up is we ate with a tortilla, right? Most everything we ate was with a tortilla.
Okay.
And
good way to eat.
It's a beautiful way to eat. But it wasn't very impressive. And he pulled me aside and he goes, we aren't doing this. And he goes, I understand where you come from. He goes, we'll be at my house for dinner at 6:00 tonight. And so that evening, I was given a very intense class on etiquette and how I need to eat, and in the corporate world, what that looks like. And, I have to thank him for that. He really did introduce me to a lot of things and corrected a lot of my bad behavior.
Yeah. So. And I'm sure he did some of that because it was a reflection on him and it was his job. But I imagine to have you at his house, is different. Like that's got to be.
Yeah.
I care about people.
Yeah.
Are you still in touch with him or?
Yeah, I do have plans to reach out to him. We haven't connected in quite a while, but he's still very much a part of what I do every day. And
big shout out to Bill Jackson. Then.
Bill Jackson, Boise, Idaho, Action Jackson.
All right, Action Jackson. So you graduate?
Yep.
With a degree in civil engineering?
Civil engineering with a minor in mining engineering.
Okay. And then right back to Boise?
Right back to a coal mine in Texas. So it was, I actually met another engineer in Boise by the name of John Agee, who took me under his wing as well. And when I graduated, John was working at this coal mine in Texas. And I don't know how it all happened, but I knew that when I graduated, I was going to work for Morrison Knudsen, MK. And it just so happened that John was in Texas, and that's where I ended up. So I got to go to work, all along the way, I'm with people that are making a difference in my life. And it just is, like you said, this chess match that's happening without any knowledge of us knowing the details is going on behind the scenes. Right. So I'm placed into Texas working under John Agee.
And then how long did you do that?
Well, it was only 2 years. And the reason it was only 2 years is because the mine I was at adopted a new software system, and it was a 3D modeling of surface mining operation. And because I was young and because I had this opportunity and I was working under John Agee, who worked his butt off. He was the first one there, last one to leave, worked on Saturdays. And that's the mentality they put into me. Because I had that mentality and was able to model that work ethic. Now, I come from a long line of people who know how to work, right? So it was long before John Agee, I saw people working from 3, 4 in the morning to 6, 7 o'clock at night.
Right.
Doing
concrete. Yeah.
Doing concrete work. It's the most brutal industry there is. Big shout out to people who can actually do that. We talk about, well, it's snowing, I got to go out and shovel. The inconvenience of that. If you're in the concrete trades, you're up early in the morning. And then by 7 a.m., your body is under stress. You're working, you're in the elements, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, and you do that all day long. So, of course, coming from that and then going into the professional world with John Agee, and here's a guy who is just absolutely disciplined, right? He shows up every day, brings his A game. He's just the perfect model of how you get things done in that industry. So I learned this software, and because I'm working all the time, I start to learn it better than a lot of people in the industry. So it created an opportunity for me to travel to Germany to work at an open pit coal mine in Germany. So it was during the deprivatization of the German coal industry. Or I should say, it was the privatization of the German coal industry, where the government-run mines were taken over, given to private companies to own and operate.
Interesting.
And that created a big demand for American technology. And I just happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Once the government's not involved, then efficiency starts to matter. Then profits start to matter, and
in East Germany. So I didn't go to like Berlin. I did go to Berlin, but where I ended up in Germany wasn't, the pictures you see and the beautiful mountains. And I was in former East Germany.
Ooh.
Right. So it was all.
Did you see the wall?
I saw pieces of
Parts
the wall.
Of the wall, yeah.
Yeah. But I also saw and got to know the people of East Germany. And in these coal mines, the mine would employ 30,000 people. Well, by the time we had gone through 2 years of going through the East German coal mines, that same mine would employ 3,000 people. So 27,000 people lost their job because the mine was now privatized and run for profit. So we weren't exactly welcome there.
I could see that.
But I was received by the people I was working with as somebody who was there to help them. And because I knew this software and I could run the software, they took me in, and I got to be very close with a lot of them. So it was a great experience. The fact that I learned this software, I was able to then travel from there to other parts of the world, Venezuela, Australia, all parts of the U.S. just working in this.
On somebody else's dime, no less. Getting
Yeah.
paid to go, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And, it was a hard life. It was a lot of travel, a lot of long hours. I mean, every day was a 12-hour day, but I also got to see a lot of the world at a young age.
Traveling, I always say traveling is glamorous to people who don't have to travel for work.
Yeah. If you travel for recreation, it's awesome.
Then it's fun. Yeah, you see cool stuff, but every hotel looks the same. Every breakfast buffet looks the same.
Yeah.
Every waffle machine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how'd you end up in the family business?
Oh, well, it was a detour off of the path of the mining business that I was in. And I was actually part of a team that was looking at starting contract mining for in Jamaica in a bauxite mine.
Hmm.
So once again, that sounds glamorous, right? But the bauxite mine is actually deep in the center of Jamaica, where there are no beaches, where there are no resorts.
It's just hot.
It's just hot. It's a lot of poverty and a bauxite mine. And the bauxite is a raw material that's used in the creation of aluminum. So it's big business, right? And I was picked to join a team that was writing the proposal for that contract. And so I went down to Jamaica a couple times. We made connections. We built relationships. We were actually given the project. And my job was going to be as the mine engineer for a bauxite mine in Jamaica. Basically, the dream job. I was going to be the John Agee of this bauxite mine in Jamaica. I had made it, right?
Yeah.
I had achieved.
How old are you at this point?
I was about 29.
Okay. Put in your time.
Yeah, I'd put in a lot of hard
to pay
time.
off.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I had, that position normally goes to a much older person,
Mm-hmm.
but I had put in the time, and with a lot of great mentoring, I was in a position to do that. And I was back in the U.S. and I was visiting my parents, and I was hanging out with my dad when I found out that an Australian company had come in and undercut our bid, and that the bauxite mine was now going to be given to this company.
Mm.
So there I sat without the Jamaican
This big project
mine engineering manager position. And my company decided at that point, or offered me at that point, a position in corporate.
Mm.
Well, I knew that position in corporate wasn't going to last long. I knew I'd be back on the road very soon. I also suspected I'd be going back to Venezuela, and I would become permanent in Venezuela.
Mm.
And at the time, I just didn't think, I'd been in Venezuela. It's politically
tumultuous,
a lot of upheaval.
They're communists now. So,
yeah. It was a rough
all
time.
of the process because they weren't at that time, right?
They were.
There was there
were a lot of things going on.
And stuff.
I remember leaving Venezuela, and there were times where we would have a driver who would take us to the airport, and based on what was going on at the time, we would either ride out to the airport comfortably, or we'd have to get down in the back seat, because Americans, if they knew you were an American, and they knew his car, right? So they knew he was transporting expats back and forth to the airport. But if they thought he had a person in the car, you were potentially a target for a kidnapping, which is how they were raising money. It was a very, very corrupt system at the time, and I know they're still going through a lot right now, but I didn't think that I wanted to live there, knowing what I knew. So I'm hanging out with my dad. We're talking about his business, and he and my brother, or he and his brother, had built a business that was somewhere near $1 million in revenue a year. So it was they were doing well.
How many guys did they have at the time?
They had maybe 10 guys. And it was a great company for them and what they were doing. Right. And I would come in, I would help them set up, payroll, get a computer in, set up the fax machine, all those things we were trying to modernize and try to help him out. And then he offered me the idea of, well, maybe you just stay here. Right. I mean, I don't think they wanted to see me traveling anymore. Like, it was glamorous for a while, but
right.
I mean, I think they could see the wear and tear that it was taking on me.
You weren't really happy, and
it was very difficult. Towards the end, it would get really hard for me to fly out. And But I was a company man, so I'd go wherever, whenever, and for as long as they needed me to go. So we talked about the idea of me coming back. And I think it was just when that happened, when Jamaica fell apart, I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought, I'll give it a try. I'll give it a go. My uncle had talked about retiring, so there was an opportunity there that maybe I could become a part of the business that way. And so
not just be an employee, but buy into part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It had to have something. I mean, that was enticing to me because it was an opportunity to be in business for myself.
Right.
But it was also, my dad and my uncle planning their succession planning, right? How are they going to eventually get out of that business? And
so your uncle was older than your dad?
He was younger than my dad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he wanted out. He just was tired, and it's a brutal business.
What year was this?
This was in 99.
Okay.
Yep. So in 1999, I decided to leave my corporate job and come back and drive my uncle's old used pickup back and forth to Colorado Springs, where I lived at the time. And it was a very humbling experience. We made it work. We just figured out the pay was going to be the pay, which is a massive pay cut for me to do that, a lot of risk to do that. But it didn't take long before we were starting to do our own excavation, starting to do our own river restoration. We needed to, right? There were now 3 people who were going to be owners of this company. Yeah. We needed revenue to justify that. So we went after it and we got it.
What kind of work did you guys start pursuing?
So we segued from the structural concrete into the river restoration.
Because there's a ton of guys doing the structural stuff.
Yeah, there's a ton of guys doing flat work concrete.
Right.
It's a very low margin, high labor cost business. There's a fewer subset of guys doing the structural concrete. Mm-hmm. And the niche my dad and my uncle were in and was that doing complicated structural concrete.
Okay.
So they were more specialized, and my dad had a special talent for building those things quickly. And that's really how they built the business, right? Building those types of structures.
Okay. They were the go-to guys for complicated structural stuff.
Yep. And it wasn't easy work, but very driven and very focused on making it. I mean, they had no other option, right?
Yeah.
So they made a business out of that. When I came back in, we looked at maybe doing the work ourselves as the general and not being a subcontractor to somebody. How could we go about doing that? And then things.
Kind of licensing do we need? All insurance?
Yeah. How to bid work, how to bid big work, as a prime contractor, how to negotiate bid bonds, just the whole the government contracting piece of that. Mm-hmm. And how are we going to go get those projects for ourselves? And then how are we going to do the excavation? Well, through the network of people at the time that just started to line up, people started to come in, and then we started doing river restoration. And most river restoration has a structural concrete component.
Explain that to the layman. What is river restoration?
So river restoration is usually when a river needs to be upsized to accommodate development or urbanization, or it needs to be repaired due to flood damage.
Erosion.
And it's a very niche market, but in Colorado, and being on the plains of Colorado and the mountains just to our west, we have a lot of rivers and waterways trying to get east. And then we also have a bunch of urbanization. So when you put those two things together, there's a certain amount of work that needs to be done for those things to coexist.
I got you. Yeah. We've got to put the water where we want it.
Exactly.
That's where you guys come in.
Yep.
So you started out, so you're in that, thinking back to 99, 2000, Y2K, your dad and your uncle had to have had a lot of trust in you because you're coming in and disrupting the whole thing.
Yep.
We're not going to just be a sub anymore. Mm-hmm. We're going to go after the whole steak. We're just going to take a bite. Right.
Yep.
Were they intimidated by that? Were they nervous? Were they like, because you could have blown the whole thing up and they had this pretty good thing going that then Jerry came in and spoiled. So what was that?
Yeah.
What were those conversations like? Because there are people listening who are in family businesses.
Yeah.
And, it's usually the young buck coming in and saying, hey, I've got all these ideas. Let's use some technology. But the old guard is saying, well, you wouldn't be eating if it wasn't for the way I've been doing it. You know what I mean?
Right,
So talk a little bit about that.
It is very tough. You have to be a humble servant to your elders, and you have to swallow your pride, and you have to shut your mouth and listen. And I was very close to my dad.
Those are all hard things to do.
It was very hard. My dad and my uncle both, I was very close to them. So I didn't have a problem with that part. I knew that for this whole thing to work, I needed to give them the respect at every opportunity. However, I also knew that there was opportunity there, and that we were in a niche market that not a lot of people wanted to work in, right? It's not just doing structural concrete, but you're doing structural concrete with the river right next to you. You're in the mud all the time. You're trying to figure out if it's going to rain. Is it going to mess up our progress?
So you've got to divert the river while you work on it and then bring it back in.
Most of the time, yeah.
That's a lot, yeah.
It is. It's a lot. It's risky. And I started to build relationships with people who were experts in doing that. And little by little, they would come to work for us. And I don't ever think that my skill was the engineering or the design or the execution as a businessman.
So like the technical side of it was not your biggest contribution.
Yeah. I mean, there was some technical stuff to do. And the fact that I was an engineer from the Colorado School of Mines opened a lot of doors for our company and gave us instant credibility in that space. But my main job was managing personalities and building teams, right? So all of that technical knowledge, 5 years of just brutal, torturous engineering school.
Yeah.
It didn't really matter. It all came down to building teams, right? It all came down to the things that Bill Jackson, John Agee, Kevin Jeldon taught me, right? On how to manage men.
Give us a couple of thoughts on that. How do you manage grown men?
Be one yourself. Take all of your ego, and stuff it in a drawer, and do what's best for the company. Do what's best for these people, and really approach it as a servant to them. And your ego really does have to go away. You can't. For example, I had my dad and my uncle. If we all three had an ego, it would have never worked. Right? It took somebody to put their ego away and try to manage and navigate those complex relationships. And then that just translated to when we were hiring people, right? If you hire somebody, they have an ego. If you're aware enough of that and can get a read on what makes them tick, what they need, then you can start to adapt and play the chess game with what do I need to do so that this person feels respected, heard, and motivated.
Right. Everybody needs to, it's hard to feel like you're losing all the time as a man, right? Or anybody, a woman, anybody, right? You don't want to feel like you're always conceding. That gets old. So that's the fine chess game you're talking about, that fine line of, I'm going to let you, I need you to feel like you were heard and you got what you were asking for. It's the way I look at it, it's always, the answer is yes, but here's how we're going to have to get there. It might not be the way you're thinking, but the answer is going to be yes. We'll just got to figure it out. Yeah. It's a challenge, man.
Yeah. You got to put your ego away to be the ultimate diplomat in business.
Yeah.
Especially in family business. I can't think of one time where I had an argument with my dad. Just would not let it happen.
Right.
It's just out of respect for him, there's just no way that was going to happen.
Right. That's because he's still on top of that. He's your dad.
Yeah.
More than whatever business it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate. My dad and I pastor this church together, and we've never had that.
Yeah.
Like an argument or anything.
Yeah.
Because that is more important than this.
Yeah, so, for sure. That relationship is more important than anything else.
Right.
And the fact that, that's the person I looked up to for 18 years of my life. For me, it just wasn't an option. Right.
Plus, he's no slouch because he built something significant without all of the extra advantages that you had by going to school and making connections. He did it. He just grinded it out. So that's pretty something to respect too.
Yeah, who was
Big
his?
Shout out to Herman.
Yep. Who was his Bill Jackson, right? I mean, I'm sure he had mentors along the way. I know there were people in the business he respected, but we're talking a different level of making it,
Right.
And
Figuring
you got to make
himself.
it off of your back and your body, right? And you're just the mental toughness that requires is beyond words. Like you can have mentors, you can have connections, but so many times that they got to where they were at and my dad got to where he was just because he would outwork everybody.
Show up early, stay the latest.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then work like you wouldn't believe. Like I don't know anybody who could outwork my dad in his prime. And he had a pretty long prime.
Yeah.
But his body's paying for it now.
Sure. Yeah.
And
How old is he now?
72.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's retired.
Well, he's going to be 70. I got to be careful with this. I got to give him just, I can't be adding years or taking him away. But yeah, so he'll be 72 this year.
And he's retired.
He is retired. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So how did the transition go from your uncle at some point?
Yeah, my
transitioned
uncle retired out of the business in 2001.
Oh, okay. So he was only there a couple of years.
Yeah.
You guys were only there together a couple of years.
Yep.
And then he retired. So then it's just you and your dad.
Yeah.
Now partners for 20 years. pretty much.
Yeah, 17 years.
Okay.
Yeah. We were in business together and he retired in 2018.
Okay. So then you bought the business.
Yes.
And now you're the sole proprietor.
Yes.
All right. What's the business? How many guys do you have now, or whatever you want to share about how big it is compared to where it was?
Yeah. So we run about 85 guys now.
Okay.
We run anywhere from 25 to, I would say approximately 25 million a year in revenue.
Okay.
85 guys.
Sorry, I thought you said 25 million. Hold on.
You don't get to keep all that though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Believe me.
Some years you don't get to keep any of it.
Exactly. Yeah. I know how that feels, man. And so, so let's talk a little bit now, Jerry, about kind of where you're at in life now. You're not 18 anymore. You're not 28 anymore. You've got a couple boys that are about to, one's in college, one's staring college right in the face, right?
Yep.
Different stage of life than you were as a young, hungry lion. Now you're an older, wiser lion, still hungry, but in a different way.
Yeah.
So I refer to this as the second act of life. Because talk about what you think about this, Jerry. I think every man, not every woman is wired like this, but I think just about every man is, where you have to, in order to look in the mirror and respect yourself, you have to do the thing. You have to get the degree. You have to build the company. You have to get the job. You have to get the girl, whatever it is that checks the box of I made it and I did the thing, right? But I don't think doing the thing in and of itself is fulfilling enough. Because once you get there, most folks look around and say, is this it? There's got to be more. So then you go from a life of achieving to a life of significance. How do I make my life really matter? I mean, we can keep climbing and keep piling up stuff and keep, cars and houses and whatever. And plenty of folks do that. But I think there's more. And I know there's more in you because we've been friends a long time. So talk about that transition in your thinking now. I know you're not planning to leave your company. So if you're listening from Naranjo, everything's fine. But but where's your head at now in that space?
First and foremost, I think it's around guiding my boys to be men. And
how old are they?
They are 17 and 20.
Okay.
And that is probably the most important job I have, is being there for them as a mentor and a dad. So the best way I know to do that is to model all the things that I think will give them a good life. And first and foremost is being a good person and modeling that behavior for them. I would say that I don't know what they're ultimately going to do.
They don't know.
They don't really
Right,
know.
yeah.
Yeah. Especially now, right? And my oldest son graduated in 2020, and he actually didn't. I mean, the graduation was on a football field, and we were in squares, pods, 4 family members to watch him graduate
During COVID.
during COVID. Yeah. So they're going through their own trials and tribulations, and whatever they choose to do in their academic career, I will totally support. I've got to say that that's probably been one of the things that's been super important to me, is that get an education first, and then you at least have that behind you, and that will help you inform what you want to do later in life.
Opens doors for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And the relationships, I talk all the time about going to Colorado School of Mines and doing the insane calculations that you're never ever going to use in your lifetime. Well, there's a reason for all of that. And one of the things that I've told them is that there's nothing or hardly anything I learned at school that I apply to my daily life now.
Right.
But what it was the ultimate training ground to discipline your mind, to solve problems.
Yes.
Right.
Shows that you can find the answer to shows that you can stick with something, shows that you're not a quitter. Yeah. There's a lot of upside.
Absolutely. Yeah. Going through Colorado School of Mines, I knew that. I knew this right away as soon as I went to work in corporate world. So there's no problem, no technical problem you can give me that I'm not going to be able to solve. Eventually I'll solve it. And if I got to work, nonstop for 4 days, I will figure it out. That's the kind of confidence that education gave me.
Right.
It wasn't that I knew how to do this calculation or that calculation or this theorem or whatever applies to the problem. It was that I knew that when I needed to, I could sit down and figure it out with all the tools that I had around me. And I just want them to have that, whatever discipline they go into, whether it's theology potentially for my younger one or management for my older son, whatever it is, I want them to have been in the gymnasium of mental exercise that pushes them and makes them uncomfortable.
The word that we're dancing around is grit. That you want them to have grit.
Yep.
Because if you have that, that's Rudy at Notre Dame. The dude had grit. He just wouldn't quit.
Yep.
You can't teach that, but you can train it.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of kids say, well, I don't know why going to school is so stupid, right? When am I ever going to use this again? I said, you're missing the point completely.
Yeah.
What you're experiencing is discomfort and learning the art of discipline, because it's only through learning that you'll be able to navigate successfully all the things you want to navigate in life.
Time management. There's so much. Yeah. So many good lessons.
Relationships.
Yeah.
It is.
I don't like this teacher. They don't like me.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you, I've taught it at the university level. There were students I didn't like. That's real, right? Their personalities were human beings.
Yeah.
Dealing with someone who you don't like and doesn't like you and still coming to a successful end is important. You've got to know how to do that. So anyway.
I had a professor at Colorado School of Mines who walked in. It was dynamics, which is a super tough class. And he walked in and he slammed his papers on the front of the front desk, and he called my name out. He said, "You managed to score a 23 on our first exam." And I was like, wow, the guy just put me on blast.
Wow.
In front of the whole class, right?
It wasn't out of 24.
It was not. It was 23 out of 100. And I was like,
wow.
I studied so hard, and there was nothing I could do to prepare for that. Nothing more I could do to prepare for it. It's just extremely difficult. And he said, and you had the high. Because all of you pack up your books and get the what out of my classroom.
He kicked the whole class out?
He kicked us out.
So you had the highest grade in the class and it was a 23?
It was a 23.
Maybe it wasn't the students. Wow.
That was just the brand of education
he was
dealing in.
Yeah, the gauntlet.
He made you feel like the dumbest kid walking the earth.
There's two kinds of professors, and this always irritated the heck out of me when I was at UNC. There are some that you get over, there's two kinds of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get over a wall. Now you have a decision to make. It's a hard wall to get over. You could either throw a rope over and try and help the next person a little bit, or you can add a layer of bricks and make it harder.
Mm-hmm.
And in higher education, there's both. And I never wanted to be that second kind. And it sounds like he's that guy where he's just, I'm going to make this as difficult as I can.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Yeah. And he would berate us. He would make fun of us.
Wow.
But you know what? I remember him more than most every other professor, right?
It gives you a fire in your belly when you have a antagonist like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There are a few professors that I wanted them to know that I was working in the industry, right? Like I was having some level of success,
right? Yeah,
because they absolutely just wreck your confidence. But I don't know. At this point, looking back, I'm not so sure I would have had it any different.
Good. Yeah. So then, being a good dad, father, role model.
Yeah.
And then what else? Talk about the farm.
Yeah, the farm started out as a real estate investment. So I also do real estate investing. I did a lot of that with my dad, mostly in commercial properties. And the thing I'll tell you about the farm is that I had a vision to have a piece of property on the I-25 corridor. And that was, not too far east, not too far west. That was underpriced. So I could buy it at a value so that we could store excess material, pipe, concrete, blocks, mud mats, equipment, whatever we needed to store out there, we could store.
Boulders, whatever.
Rock, extra rock, topsoil, whatever. As long as it was near I-25. So we're in and out of Denver quickly. It made sense. I knew we could save a lot of money by having something in the I-25 corridor. And of course, since we do most of our work in Denver, something, closer to Denver.
Than Greeley, at least.
Than Greeley. So for 9 years, I watched different real estate websites. And I would run up and down the corridor. Every Sunday night was my ritual. Is there anything that's popped up that would be, worth looking at? And a couple of years back, 2.5 years back, it actually happened, right? This property, it made no sense. It's 12 acres. It's half a mile off the interstate. It seems like it's way underpriced. This was Sunday night.
Close to Johnson's Corner.
Yep.
That's a plus.
Right. Yeah, you could get fuel, you get a cinnamon roll, you get breakfast, you get dinner.
In Colorado, yeah.
Yeah. You can buy a new cowboy hat, all of that in the same stop. So something didn't seem right to me. So that night I emailed the listing realtor, and I said, I want to see this in the morning, first thing. It just hit the market. It'd only been on that website 2 days. I went out there, I looked at it. I said, this is perfect. The price doesn't make sense. And I want to make an offer. I didn't know how I was going to fund it, how any of that. So I'm going to make an offer. I want to get it under contract and I want it immediately. So that was at 10 in the morning. We had a contract written on it by noon. By the end of the day, there were 3 other backup offers waiting on that property. Wow. So I knew the discipline had paid off, right? The discipline of checking every Sunday night for something that didn't make sense, but met all this other criteria, it had finally paid off. And of course, the sellers were trying to boot me out. They're trying to get these other backup offers who were offering way more. But I had locked it down. I had rock solid.
Why was it so low? Native American burial ground? What was it?
I think the house, the barn they used to house sheep in there. Okay. So they would show sheep. Okay. So they had like shearing stations. They had treadmills to exercise the sheep. The barn was actually disgusting. And most of it was disgusting. Really, so the house had never been maintained. It was really not, it was not in great shape. They had done zero maintenance to this house. And so that to me told me that they were living like that and it wasn't valuable to them.
Got it.
Right. They treated it like it wasn't valuable to them. And it was valuable to me.
Yeah.
So once I grabbed it, I moved a bunch of stuff out there. We started, putting things in the barn that we needed to protect from the elements. And then, wintertime in Colorado, of course, we're shut down because of snow or cold weather. And the concrete crews, we try to keep them busy doing something, right? Where they're doing volunteer work, snow removal, or we're, trying to keep a few guys busy. And we started finishing the inside of the barn. We started, finishing the wall, like insulation, shiplap.
So it's just steel barn.
Yeah, steel barn, nothing fancy. We dug it all out. We put a concrete floor in. And little by little, it started to become comfortable, right? So then we started having a couple meetings out in the barn, just staff meetings. And I had an opportunity to acquire 2 Wagyu steers from one of our subcontractors. And once I brought those steers out there, everything started to turn. The attention of everybody started to turn to the steers, the health of the steers, how they're looking. When are we going to butcher? Man, that's going to be a great barbecue.
You're talking about the employees.
The employees, team, who were coming out for the occasional meeting.
They're all invested now.
They're invested in the barbecue.
Yeah.
But
how's ribeye and how's sirloin doing? Huh?
Yeah, who's gonna get what? Yeah. It was kind of the whole calculation. So I felt that energy, and I felt that would be something I could do. That was different. That I could get 7 more steers, raise them at the end of the year. Every key employee or superintendent level or manager level would get half a beef.
Wow.
Right? That was my idea. And we did that. So the year goes on, raise the cows. Everybody, once they hear of this idea, then the energy that started flowing into that place was multiplied. Everybody knew that one of those cows was theirs, or at least half of it was theirs.
Yeah.
And it just created a different way of being when we were together. And it felt like the right thing to do. And then in my mind, it felt like 3 Spikes was there for that reason, was there to create that sense of philanthropy and brotherhood and doing things not necessarily for the bottom line, but doing the right thing. So we planted a garden. That's the other thing we did as the summer rolled in. We planted a garden. And of course, when you have a bunch of guys and a bunch of construction equipment and you say plant a garden, the garden becomes as massive a garden as 1 acre. The 1 acre piece of garden will hold, right? So they go all out. We got the biggest garden by 10 times the size I thought we were going to build. But it was fun, and everybody had an energy around the garden too. And then we started giving away the produce, right? We started giving it away to retired employees or people on fixed income or the Well County Food Bank. And it was obvious to me that it was a mission of service more than it was a mission of anything else. And I think I've got to believe that the reason that property came to be and came into my path was because it was meant for something like this.
Cool. Yeah.
So,
plus that creates and influences and shapes the culture of the whole company.
Absolutely.
When everybody's has this feeling of this is about more than just us and our paychecks and even river restoration. And that's noble work because it's helping people. But this is different. And so that starts creating conversations about what else could we do? And that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. We would have parties out there, and it dawned on me that when we have employees all get together, we have a good time. When we have employees bring their families, it's 10x better experience for everybody, right? You get to see the kids of these employees, these hardworking people, relax. You get to see the kids chase chickens. You get to see them try to get the cow's attention. You get to see all of these magical moments.
These kids, you've heard their names before.
Yeah. And they show up.
Man, you're sick a lot because your dad calls in about once a month.
We don't go there at the farm. We don't discuss attendance. Yeah. That's for the office to sort out. But it is a magical experience to bring the kids of employees out to the farm is for me is the ultimate reminder that we are doing something good. Right.
Okay. So Jerry, I want to talk about how you're moving into coaching. But before I do that, let's talk a little bit about what's your morning routine like? What's your day like? Time to wake up.
Yeah. My morning routine is under construction at the moment. So I'm trying to be more mindful with my morning, trying to get up around 5 and then pour into my education and to my being from 5 to 6. I'm trying to give myself 1 hour before I ever check the phone, before I ever check email, Voxer, text messages. It's just 1 hour of trying to build a better me.
What are you doing? Reading, working out?
Yeah. So actually my son and I have started my son is my coach in a lot of ways. Spiritually, he called me on Friday night a few weeks back and said, "You have time for a 45-minute Bible study?" And I was not feeling good that night. I was not up for it. I was already in bed, as a matter of fact. I was just not feeling great. And I said, "Absolutely." And he shows up, right? And he's asking me, "Do you have a physical Bible?" I said, "Yes, I do. But I can't find it right now." I actually did give one away, right? So I was trying to find my other one. And he's like a little disappointed, but he goes, "That's okay. We can do without it." He goes to his laptop. He puts on the TV screen a session or a training module about praying, right? So he says every day we should be praying at some level, right? And what's your practice? And we just had this back and forth of, well, this is mine, what's yours? And we had this conversation. So we made a commitment that for the next however many days until the end of February, we were going to be invested in this training to be better at praying, right? How to pray. What does it mean to pray? So I think that's what I'm trying to do a lot now is say, how do I wake up, set my intention for the day? I go to bed with an intention. I wake up trying to recapture that intention. And then I go into that exercise, whether it's reading, praying, journaling, things that are all investments in myself, in my mental health, in my spiritual health.
Right.
And I'm trying to do that for an hour.
There's the default, I would say, especially for a guy over 50, I'm 50, is I've pretty much learned everything I'm going to learn. Or we get to a certain spot in life where we think, well, I don't really need to do that kind of stuff. This is when we need to do it more.
Yeah.
Because as a young guy, for example, just speaking, I didn't have a lot of opportunities. I mean, I was just scratching and trying to get noticed and trying to figure out what I was supposed to do, whatever. Now, there's a lot more to choose from. So what do I need to pick? Well, I need more guidance now. I need to really figure out and identify who I am and what I'm about and what my values are, so that when another opportunity comes along, does this or does this not align with what I want to do? And when you have that kind of alignment, it's easy to say no.
Yeah.
Because it's just glaring. Yeah, I'm not doing that. No thank. I appreciate it. Great opportunity. 20 years ago, I would have jumped at that. Yeah. But not right now.
Well, it's like the non-traditional student, right? We've all been, when I was in school, there would be guys who were in their 40s who were now back in engineering school. We hated those guys. They had all their homework done. They were organized.
They were questions.
They were sitting in the front of the classroom. Yeah. They were asking all the questions. They were talking to the professor after class. They were soaking in all that knowledge, right? They were just
they saw the value
passionate about their education. And we thought, oh, this guy, we're that non-traditional student now, or at least I am. It's like, I've got so much to learn. I get anxiety by the number of books I haven't read. That gives me anxiety now because I got so much to learn.
Are you reading, listening to books? What do you do?
The best way for me is to actually read them and write in the book. I get the most from that.
So a paper book,
Yeah.
writing in the margins.
That works best for me. I can do the e-readers. I can do book. I'll listen to books as I'm driving. But really, the experience for me is if I'm reading and writing something down from it.
That's good.
So that's why I have all this anxiety, because it takes a long time to get through a book that way.
Yeah, got it.
You got to be at a desk, or you got to be in a chair. You got to have something to write with. It's got to be a whole thing.
You have to turn off distractions.
Yeah. It's an intense experience.
All right, so let's talk now, Jerry, about you're moving into doing some coaching. What is that like? How did you get into that? What's that looking like in terms of, we all have 24 hours in a day. Got a lot going on. How is that? How are you navigating that? How's that working?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about with my boys and how am I showing up for them? And
how you want to be remembered, all of that. Legacy.
Yeah. What's the best thing I can be doing for them? So it all started for me around 2018 when my dad was going to retire. I reached out to a guy that I know. His name is Alok Apadarai, and he's a mentor, coach, right? And what I wanted from him wasn't anything other than, how do I navigate this buyout with my dad, with, you got money involved and you got family involved.
Right.
And I want a second set of eyes on this. Somebody who's a third party, who doesn't have emotional attachments to either person, to help me walk through that in a way where I'm being as healthy as I can be.
Right. You want it to be fair and equitable, but you can't go over one way or the other, because he's your dad either way. Right. So that's,
I just wanted to do it right. And I wanted to have a relationship with my dad after that.
Right.
I didn't want anything to get in the way of that. I've seen it in my family, especially, the grudges and it goes back generations of how, when things don't go right with money, you can destroy families. So I really didn't want that to happen. So I reached out to this guy who I thought could walk this walk with me and provide me some guidance and just be a third party, second set of eyes. In our relationship, through that time, I became connected to his network of people. And we really didn't, we got through all of that. And it was years after that I connected with him again on something. I was telling him about Three Spikes Farm. I said, I've got this farm. I want it to be a philanthropic farm. I really believe in my heart that this place is meant to do good and give back. And I just want to talk about it with you, because we've had these conversations.
right. It's a good extra set of eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. He said, well, I'm having an event in July in Scottsdale, and come out. We can talk about it. I said, well, what's the event? He said, doesn't matter.
Just come.
Just come.
You want to talk to me? Come over here. Yeah.
And he's a pretty highly successful coach. So, to get some of his time is either going to cost you a ton of money, or you got to have a lot invested in this thing. Right.
Okay.
And we've been very close friends, but when he said, just come, for whatever reason, I decided to just go and listen. And I walked out of that 3-day event with an insight into people trying to do good, right? There were business owners, private equity investors, podiatrists, other coaches, all in this room, who are all wanting to uplift other people. And it was really a cool experience for me to be around people like that, thinking on that level.
Yeah.
So
it's so helpful to ask someone who's a couple steps ahead of you.
Yeah.
How did you get there? I mean, you can look at someone 10 steps ahead of you, and you might as well, it's so far out of the league.
Yep.
But when you have someone 1 or 2 steps ahead, then they can also remember being where you're at. So super helpful.
Yeah. And I think as men, we don't ever reach out and ask for help. Right. And it wasn't that I was asking for help, but in a way I was like, I want to do something.
You're asking for guidance.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want your expertise on this. I need your eyes on this. And as men, why don't we do that? Why don't we go to somebody who's older in our family and say, look, I just want to talk with you. I want to sit with you. I want to understand how you see the world.
Mm.
You've obviously navigated successfully certain things in your life. What can I gain from that? How can that help me? And as men, we don't do that. We'll figure it out ourselves. We'll listen to podcasts. We'll read a book. Being in person with other people who have that same energy as you do is a multiplier effect. How to uplift people, right? So from that event,
I understand that environment. I pastor a church called Mosaic. And that's really what a church is. We're all gathering. We're all on the same journey, different places on it for sure.
Yeah.
But that's what we're doing. We're all trying to fulfill what God has asked us to do, grow in our faith. That's what it is. Yeah. So interesting. Anyway.
Yeah. And it's all, there's a lot of show business that goes into that experience because it is a celebration, right? You are actually there, and it does feel good to be with other people who have that same intentionality in their life.
Okay.
Right. So what happened from that point to now is that I realized how many people I was already mentoring, how many people I already was their first phone call when things got really difficult in business, or their first phone call when things got really difficult in their personal life. And I realized that through Three Spikes Farm and being a philanthropic farm and giving back to the community, that all of a sudden that message could be heard better, right? So as a man, if you're going through something and you want to talk, then you come to Three Spikes Farm, and all of a sudden, all of your perceptions about the world change. You're out here, you see steers that are being raised for employees. You see chickens and the eggs are being eaten by employees of Naranjo. You're seeing a garden, that's harvested for people, and there's no profit motive behind any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you get in that space mentally, and you let your guard down, and you can have those conversations.
Right.
So
that also starts creating ideas in their specific kind of area, or like when I go visit another church, I might see 100 things, but one thing makes me think of, we could do this at Mosaic differently. Not necessarily what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's what they're looking at you and saying, I'm not going to go probably start a farm.
Yeah.
But this gets me on a different path of thinking.
Yeah. I always call that the $1 million conversation moment, right? You could read a book, and if you take one line out of the book and apply it to your life, that's all you needed out of that book. There are times in a conversation with somebody you could have $1 million conversation. Some little tweak of how you looked at things before that you don't look at the same now, or an opportunity. And
one way they said something.
Yeah. Right? Or one idea that you have from a lot of people saying, or a lot of people's different perspective on the topic. So when I'm with that group, there are times I've had $1 million conversations, right? It's maybe a 15-minute conversation, but the idea I take away from it has that sort of an impact on my business, on the community. If it's something I can multiply, then I'm all in on that. So there are people in this group that I connect with regularly, and we meet every other week by Zoom. But we've also been to Tulum, Telluride, Tucson, and we're going to India in February. So it's this group of people. Yeah, who are
all doing the same kind of stuff.
They're doing the work. They're putting themselves in the room where those conversations are happening, right? So my idea isn't necessarily to coach and create a business out of it. I mean, I'll do that. One of the things my mentor said is, I charge you because I want you to come here playing all out. So if I charge you $20, you're going to show up. It's like a gym membership. If you pay $9 a month for a gym membership, whether you go or you don't go, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You pay $1,000 a month, you're going to be there. Right. You're probably going to be in shape.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing with coaching.
I'm on the $9 a month plan, I think. Planet Fitness.
Diane said I couldn't do any insulting of the host, so I'm going to
I
refrain
appreciate that.
from commenting.
Thank you, Diane.
But it's the same thing. He says, I only charge you enough for you to pay attention. You're not going to miss an appointment. You're not going to miss our 90 minutes that we only have every 2 weeks. How much is it going to cost for you to pay attention? And that's really how that relationship goes. So I'm not really interested. I do a lot of mentoring with young people and young professionals. I do a lot of that. But it's also for the mentor to raise their game. When they are being paid, all of a sudden, that 1 hour conversation is getting about 3 hours of prep, and it's getting another 3 hours of follow-up, and it's all mental energy going towards that one person's problem or idea.
Or potential, right?
Or potential. And I think that the money that changes hands is really just an energy that we are going to create something powerful. And I mean, I hate paying it. If I'm going to meet with the Loke and I got to pay him, I hate writing that check. But when I show up, it's game on. We're going to have a very serious conversation. And from the conversation, we're going to have $1 million ideas.
Interesting. Yeah. Good. All right, Jerry, a couple more questions. The word successful is so loaded, right? It means something different to everybody. So what does that word mean to you? And are you successful?
Measuring success has meant many different things for me over the years. And as we evolve, I think it's changing all the time. It was always about getting a job, buying a house, buying a car, buying a nice car, having kids, putting them in a good school, putting them in private school, putting them in a private university. All of those are things that we think measure success. But at the end of the day, those are all goals and things you want to do. But at the end of the day, you're successful if you are able to give back, where you feel like I could go buy this or I could start this that will multiply the impact that I'm going to have. And I think that's where there's a transformation in what success means. And for me, at this point in my life, success would mean paying back all of those people who walked into my path and helped me on my journey, right? And being one of those people.
There it is.
Be those people. And you will have an impact on other people's lives. It just is the energy that you put out will impact people. So how do I be a Bill Jackson to some young student, right? How do I be a John Agee to a young up-and-coming engineer or employee of Naranjo? How do I look at someone like a Loke and be a good person, right? Have a mission of just trying to do good in the world, multiply my impact. Those are all people put in my life for a reason. And success to me is finding the next person that I want to be, right? And have an impact on as many people as possible. So speaking to that, in 2 weeks, we're hosting a Women in Construction. NAWIC is sponsoring a program out at the farm. It's a Women in Construction, National Association of Women in Construction. They're holding a building block competition for kids K through 6, right? And we're hosting that in 2 weeks. We've also partnered with Clara Brown Entrepreneurial Academy. So if you are familiar with Clara Brown, Google it. It's a much better and more concise way to explain it. But she was the first slave to travel west of the Mississippi and own a business. Wow. And she set up in the Colorado mountain towns and had a laundromat and did a bunch of different things.
I've heard of her, yeah. Now that you say that, yeah.
So the Clara Brown Academy is in Aurora. We partner with them. We do fundraising for them, with them. Anything we can do to help those kids in that school. We're trying to get an event put together in April where we'll be bringing in 2 highly respected people working in education, where the one is Mike Iskander. He has a mission to deliver his message, which relates to the mental health of kids, right?
Yeah.
And it's through time travel journeys that he does this. And then there's also an author, Kathleen Friend, who has written a book called The Greatness Chair. So what we're trying to do in April is bring them out, have an event, and bring different schools in to participate in that. So that's success to me, right? The business is the business, and the employees that work at Naranjo are absolutely the cream of the crop. Like, the team that we have is top notch. We can do all of this because of them, and it all feeds us in return. But success is when we can do things like bring kids out to the farm, give them an experience, be a Bill Jackson, be a John Agee, be a Kevin Jeldon,
Right.
be a Herman to these kids, right?
Especially seeing a person of color.
Exactly.
Looking and saying that guy somehow did it. If he could do it,
Yeah.
that's huge.
And I really, if you look at how you tackle this problem of entitlement, right? My kids grew up, they had a way better life materialistically than I did, right? Their lifestyle was way better, way easier. But what's the one thing that connects with them is being of service to others. So somebody asked me the other day, how do we teach our kids, since they've been given all of these opportunities, how do we get them to appreciate all of that? How do we get them to be good people? And I really believe it's acts of service. When they become connected to the service to others, all of that goes away. And you start to uncover what they really are underneath.
Interesting. Yeah.
So,
have you ever heard that? So what you're describing is a challenge that every parent has, right? Because you want to give your kid a better life than you had. So Mike Tyson, have you ever heard about him talk about his son wanting to box? So he had a son who wanted to box. And Mike told him, no, you can't box. And he's like, why? And he said, because you're Mike Tyson's son. And so they're going to throw the toughest, meanest junkyard dogs at you. And you're not that. He said that what created me was being raised in an orphanage in New York. And I was starving. And, he goes, I was a junkyard dog. What created you was private schools and a gated community. And he says, so we're not the same. We might be the same genetically, but we're not the same. So you'll get creamed. So the challenge for any parent who's pushed their kid up one notch is, how do I create the environment for that kid, which is what you're describing, when they were raised in a better place than I was. I don't know what their world is going to be like, but I've got to try and figure it out, because otherwise they're going to be that Mike Tyson's kid in the ring and get demolished by life. So I love that, man. Love having your kids look at other people and serving them. And yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's powerful. For them to be able to be around kids, like that energy, and to see that this kid may be coming from a tough environment. This kid may not have as much as he needs or wants. We've got to somehow open those portals for our kids to want to lift other people up.
Right.
And through them wanting to lift other people up, maybe we break through, some of that entitlement, some of that casualness that the world is there for them and it's all easy. We have to expose them to difficult situations.
Right.
We have to bring people in from all walks of life.
We've got to let them suffer and struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
It's hard as a parent because you want to rescue them.
Yep.
Especially when you have the means to rescue them.
Yep.
But sometimes that's the worst thing we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, last question. Where have you seen God in all of it?
I've been spending a lot of time on this recently, because when I look back through my story and where I'm at now and where I am on my journey with my son, as far as, Bible study and prayer, and he said to me the other day, we started a book together. We started reading a book on the spiritual disciplines, or we bought 2 books, same time we started, got them on the same day. We were going to read them together, read it together. And I asked him a week later, I said, okay, where are you in your book? He says, I'm on chapter 4. I said, I'm on chapter 1. I better step it up. Mm. And he said to me, 17, he said, no, Dad, read it at your pace. That's the point. The message isn't how fast you can go or where I'm at relative to you. It's like, what does it do for you and at what pace? And you absorb that at whatever pace you need to. Mm. And I'm like, 17, huh?
And also a minor flex on his dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. He loves to ask me, do you have your physical Bible? But it's okay. I take it all in because I think it's his gift, and I love having that
nurturing
interaction.
it, encouraging it.
Yeah. So what was I talking
Where's
about?
God in all of it?
Yeah. So when I look back at my life and I look back at where I came from and all of the things that happened in my life, I can count more than a dozen times where my life was at risk. Right. And there are things that I survived I shouldn't have survived. And that's happened a bunch in my lifetime. And so many stories to tell, but I won't take any more time. But there were things that happened in my life that are unexplainable as to why I survived them. And I only know that I survived them for what I'm doing right now. And it's not mine to do, right? It's not I was having a conversation the other day and something came out of my mouth that I, for the first time in my life, was watching come out of my mouth. And it wasn't something I created.
Interesting.
So I think for me, God has been patiently waiting for me to have that moment where he's speaking through me. And not
have you read The War of Art? Have you read that?
Yeah. Yeah.
He talks about the muse wanting to, he's got a very vague sense of who God is, but God is trying to speak to the earth through you. And what you're describing.
And it's not like I'm some special person. It's just that I feel like I can watch that happen now as a third party.
Yeah.
And it's not anything I created, but it was something that I needed to say or something I needed to do.
Yeah.
And it's most recently in my life, I've been able to watch those things unfold and appreciate them. And it's always something really good, right? It's always something really, it feels really good to say or do. And I'm just happy that I got to be a conduit for that to happen. Yeah. It's like the farm. I didn't buy the farm to build a philanthropic farm. I bought the farm to lay down construction materials on a piece of real estate that was underpriced. All of that is just a conduit to doing good. And it feels really awesome to be a part of it.
As it turns out, this was the plan.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Jerry, with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us. I will put Jerry's contact info and a few pictures of the work he does because it's pretty neat. I'll put that in the show notes. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.